All right. Hello, everyone. We are so excited to be with you guys and interviewing our special guest, Dinisha Arkadie Evans. So she is going to tell us a little bit more about herself, what her current position is, and she's going to describe her role and the population that she works with. So we have our Professor Richards here, and I am your professor, Dr. Arkadie. So Dinisha, what is your current position where you work at?
Right now, I am an adult protective services social worker, and I work for Los Angeles County Adult and Aging Department.
Okay.
And like I said, my role is a social worker. And
how long have you been there?
I've worked for Adult Protective Services for 19 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
wow.
Okay.
Wow. So the population you work with, is it only the elderly or?
No, I work with elderly and I work with people with disabilities. So that disabilities is a large array of people. That encompasses people with physical disabilities, mental disabilities, people with intellectual disabilities as well. So
So would that would be considered like you're a dependent adult, right? So anyone who's a dependent adult who has been have a conservatorship because they have some kind of intellectual disability or some kind of mental incapacity, right? Or
yes, but not necessarily a conservatorship, but just a disability. Any disability. You could be in the hospital and not able to, do things for yourself because you're in the hospital and be considered disabled.
Oh, so anyone that's considered disabled.
Anybody who's considered disabled at that time.
Okay. And is it elderly 65 and older?
Elderly is 60 and older.
Oh, okay. Yeah. 60 and older. I had 65 60. In my head.
No, 60
yeah, I thought it was 65 too.
60 plus.
60 plus.
Oh, okay. So you gave me some information, 60 plus. Okay. So no, thank you for that.
Oh, okay.
And then I think Professor Richard was gonna, did you have anything else you wanted to ask or the next?
Yeah. So we wanted to know, do you feel that being a part of a minority group assists you or hinders you in providing services to some of the families of the same or different ethnic, racial, gender identity than your own?
Because I'm a social worker and I'm coming to help, most of the times they don't see me as a person who has they see me as a role of authority, number one. Okay. And it usually see me as someone who's there to help. So for the most part, even if they do have some type of racial issue or some type of problem with me being African American, I'm usually accepted. And I've worked in several different areas. I worked in predominantly Latino in El Sereno. I worked in Chinatown. I worked in several different areas of the Valley. So I've worked all over Los Angeles County.
Very diverse population.
Very diverse population. I've come across some people that might have some issues, that might have some mental health issues as to why they might be racist because they have mental health issues. But for the most part, people that I'm very accepted in my position. So I don't usually have that problem.
Okay. And what about for you? How do you see, as being a part of a minority group, how does that help or hinder you? And when you're doing the service delivery or providing service delivery, how is that for you working with, other cultures and other people other than you?
I have to be respectful of their cultures. A lot of times, sometimes they want me to take my shoes off. So those are the things that you have to remember is to, whenever you're going into someone else's space, you always want to remain respectful.
Okay.
And you also want to be on the lookout and know your surroundings, but you do want to be very respectful of their cultural practices. I've had families that were Filipino me come in, they make me a whole dish, you know, a whole array of food. I've had a lot of different experiences with people of other cultures that were positive.
So what
Not
did
so
you do? Do you eat the food, or I mean,
you do eat the
Right.
food. You sit down and you do eat the food.
Wow.
Those types
Okay.
of things. As far as gifts are concerned, you do get a lot of the Chinese populations, especially around Chinese New Year's, they like to give you things. Sometimes they want to give you money. And you can't accept the money, but they usually put it in like a red envelope or an envelope. You take the envelope and you tell them, thank you, but I can't accept the money, but I'll take the envelope.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So there's some practices that you have to be aware of.
Right.
So I suggest you research.
That was my
Keep
next
your
question.
eyes open.
Okay.
Keep your eyes open. Research. I watch a lot of different programs. As far as I'm a history major, so that comes into play when I am working in social work because I enjoy social history. So one of the things that it helps me with is knowing other backgrounds and things like that, and being aware of those things.
Okay. I was going to ask you that question when you said knowing, you got to research. So if you had, a referral that you received and you knew was from a culture you may not have been as familiar with, what would you normally do to make yourself become somewhat aware and familiar with that culture before you go there?
Pretty much you do have to try to, number one, and I wish I could have more time before we go to a person's house to actually research that person. But for the most part, what usually happens is that I'll go out to do the home visit and find out this is what the culture is.
Oh,
I
okay.
kind of have to do a little more backtracking and be like, maybe find a family member or someone that might be usually there's always somebody.
A collateral contact.
Collateral contact that someone's there in the home or a family member or someone that we can call together and I can get a little more background and understanding and information about that person's, about their culture. So, and then proceed backwards.
Okay. No, that makes sense, right? Because we do realize there's always a shortage of social workers, right? There's always a surplus of work to be done with not enough social workers to go around. Okay. Well, what advice would you give social workers as far as working with the elderly population? Because that is a specialized population. And so you've been working with this population for over 19 years. So what are some advice or things that you feel they should be aware of when working with the elderly population so that they can provide quality care?
Always be respectful. Always be respectful. Remember that they are elderly. They might not be able to hear you sometimes. You might be walking into a situation where they have dementia or Alzheimer's, so you have to be very patient. It can't be quick and hurry, even though you might have like 5 or 6 home calls to do, you do have to always remember to be patient. Pack your patience.
Pack your patience.
I like that.
Right?
When you're doing
write that down.
Yeah, and remember that they like to talk, they're lonely.
Yeah.
And so you always have to be very, very respectful and give them the time that they deserve.
So would you say, because that was kind of when you're saying being respectful, I know that seems like it's very obvious, but what would you describe as being respectful? Because some people they may feel they're being respectful by like, hurry, I gotta get to this or do certain things. When you say be respectful, what comes to mind for you?
Remember, you're not the police, because I'm actually a lot of times investigating abuse. And you get some social workers that might come in as if they are, they're working with the police department. You're not working with the police department. You're a social worker. So you're trying to see what you can do to assist. And you're listening. You're letting them talk. You're gathering, you're fact gathering. So you're getting all the information in so that you can then assist them with what to do. If that's making a referral to the police department, then that's what you do. You make the referral to the police department. If that's making a referral to other outside agencies, then that's what you're doing. So that's, that's kind of what I mean by that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was going to say, it's kind of, what we discuss with social workers who are going into the field with, like, knowing your role, right?
Yeah.
And knowing your purpose and doing no harm, right? And making sure that you kind of stay in your lane and
Stay in your lane.
refer, right? Refer and identify those resources who, if that's their role and not yours, right? So knowing those things and then being respectful.
And it sounds like all of what you're saying is that big piece of engagement in that community engagement, right? So you're doing a lot of linkage and consultation. It sounds like linking them to outside resources if it's something that's needed. And that's what we do as social workers. And just from your role as Adult Protective Services, APS, when you're going in and meeting with the clients, it's because it's suspected that they have been abused in some kind of way. They're not the perpetrator. They're the ones that are, I don't want to say victims, but they are the individuals who you're concerned that someone may have done something abusive towards them.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to ask this question because I think it comes up a lot in different areas, but this, for me, this will be interesting to see how you answer. So how does age impact services and engagement provided to the elderly population? And just to give you some context why I think it's interesting, it's because I work with children or sometimes the families, and sometimes younger social workers feel worried that a parent is going to say, oh, you're too young, or you don't know what it's like to have kids, you can't relate, or, so they have a hard time with, knowing how to respond or how to work appropriately or how to kind of navigate that age difference. So, so for me, this question is like, how does age impact services and engagement with the elderly?
Well, one thing about elderly population, you're going to be younger than them, no matter most of the time, you're going to be younger than them.
Right.
But it's all about you being knowledgeable as to how they relate to you. You can be young as long as you are knowledgeable, or you seem as if you are very knowledgeable about what you're coming in to do. If they see that you're fumbling, you might not have all the answers or no information, then maybe they might treat you like, maybe, you're young. But if you seem knowledgeable, I think that has a lot to do with how they treat you in the elderly population.
Okay. So it doesn't matter that you're younger, because like you said, unless you're of the elderly population yourself, when you come in, you are going to be viewed as younger. But as long as you come in as if you are knowledgeable and know your stuff and what you're talking about, then they will be receptive. So kind of like, even if you don't know, fake it till you make it kind of thing.
Fake it till you make it. Yes.
Like there's that respect with the knowledge, right? Like the elderly population a lot of times respect the knowledge that you have and that you're there to support them.
Exactly.
Would you find it easier? One of the things that I used to often say when I was a manager working with my practitioners was, even if you don't have the information, you can let them know you'll get back to them. Like, well, wow, that's a really good question. I'm not certain, but I'll get that back I'll find that out and get back to you. Do you find that helpful?
Yeah, I do that often. I'll say, you know what, that's something that I have to go back and research, or let me find out. Let me look into that for you, and I'll get back with you. And that's usually not a problem.
Okay. Yeah. And this kind of, I know you have we've already maybe a little bit touched on this, but just more of, what do you see as being culturally responsive practices, right? When you are working with the elderly population. I know you mentioned, just cultural practices. If you go into someone that may be, Chinese descent, or may, be, Latinx descent, or whatever, certain types of things that you have to be aware of. But as far as when we talk about the elderly population, and you may have already, answered this when you were saying being respectful, but when we're talking about, so would you consider that to be culturally responsive practices, as far as always being respectful of the gym, or is there anything else that you want to add to that?
Well, you might have some, when you talk about Latinx culture, some of the Latinx cultures, they don't want to speak with you because you're not Spanish speaking, or because they might be Spanish speaking. And a lot of times I like to use my language line. Or like that. So you can't take that, you can't take it,
take offense to it.
Like take offense to the fact that that's what they want to do. You know, if they want to, they want a social worker that speaks their language, well, then you accommodate them. Right. Or, if they don't want to talk to the language line, then you accommodate them. And we at Adult Protective Services, they hire social workers of all backgrounds. So we always have some social worker that speaks their language. So
okay, I like that. So if it's more of a language barrier, right, you're being respectful of that and accommodating. But when we're talking about just the culture of the elderly population, right, because oftentimes it can be different. And I guess I should ask, have you ever ran into a situation where it was something where they didn't want to talk to you, or based upon their own culture, where they needed you to speak to someone else, like the male, or a different person? Or
yes, I have. I've come in contact with that, because you get that where they want you to speak to someone else, or they want to speak to a man, so a male social worker, and you accommodate them. You say, okay, no problem. I mean, nothing. We're social workers, so we're there to help. So if we can accommodate them, we will. So that is my practice, and I take nothing. I'm not offended by anything.
So don't take anything personal. What I'm hearing you say.
Personal, nothing personal.
Okay. Well, I'm wondering, so what have you noticed in terms of unique challenges that the elderly population faces in obtaining and receiving culturally responsive services?
Challenges as far as like,
so challenges
for California, and I think California is leading in social services. And so, for the most part, really, there's not really many challenges in California. We accommodate people for real. I don't know if you guys noticed that in social services, we have a lot of resources.
Right.
That so other areas might not have, but we kind of have a lot of resources. So I can't think of any culturally.
Well, I guess when we're talking about culturally, we're not necessarily thinking about ethnicity, but we're thinking about elderly, because that's in itself is a culture, right? So are there any types of challenges that elderly population face that a social worker should be aware of coming in? Like,
or in any disparities, like in the service delivery to the elderly, like any challenges in them accessing or receiving, or any concerns that come up?
I can't think of any, really. I'm trying to think of some.
Well, that's good.
No, we got it covered when we become elderly.
I'm telling you, recently, there's been a lot of resources out there. But one thing I can think of is that for some, not even anymore. It used to be for certain areas, we didn't have as many resources depending on the population or the amount, the type of, if it was an African American predominantly area, or an Asian predominantly area, there usually would sometimes be a little lack of resources in those areas. However, recently there's been a lot more resources given to our departments. So as far as LA County is concerned, we've had the most resources that we've had in years.
Wow.
So I don't know if it's because of the population of elderly have gone up so much, but there's been an influx of resources for our seniors. So.
Oh, wow. I mean, that's great.
You guys will be very happy with the type of resources. We have case management resources. We have executive Meals on Wheels and food resources. especially since the pandemic. There's been several different resource agencies that have come forward for our clients. Just not that long ago, I'm talking about housing resources where clients are getting apartments and just money. Been
Wow.
just various resources. So
Wow.
I was
I'm
wondering
very
if it was,
impressed.
post-pandemic, because there's been a lot of funding in general all around. So maybe,
Yes.
yeah.
One of the things that I was amazed at, I went when I was a seminar instructor and one of my students was placed at APS. I was very pleasantly surprised with the fact of how many, like you were saying, resources, because APS, like you guys have I think of it as like a resource center kind of a thing, because you guys have so many services available to offer the clients. And so I was highly impressed when, I went into the office and they took me around and showed me. I was like, wow, this is different than CPS. But
Yeah.
But that's just recently, because I've been a social worker for years. So there had been years that we hadn't had anything. And so just recently we have gotten an influx. Like I try to close my cases out, but I'm always I'm connecting them to so many resources. It takes me a long time to close my cases out. So
well, that's an improvement, and so
it
that's
is
a good thing.
Yeah,
good improvement.
That's
I'm
great.
impressed.
Well, I guess our last question, and anything else, if you wanted to add, but is what advice would you give a new incoming social worker as far as the things that they need to know when working with an individual from a different background?
Like I said, always be respectful, be patient, listen, be willing to, if it's a language barrier, be willing to use the resources that you have for reaching out to those agencies that assist with that language barrier. Family members, just be willing to work with the other family members. Just be patience is the biggest thing when working with the seniors and working with people with disabilities. So I suggest pack your patience. If you're not a patient person, then that is not the field for you. It's really not the field for you. Because there's nothing quick in that field.
Okay, that's good. I have a last bonus question for you. Can you share with us what is the most enjoyable thing about what you do, about the work that you do?
I get a chance to sit down, talk to people from different backgrounds, and just the stories that they tell you, the historical stories, their life stories, getting to know them, and knowing what they used to do. Very interesting people. So, I mean, I think that is the biggest reward that you have. Because in our area, we don't usually see a big, usually you get the reward at the end. Well, a lot of times, because we are a crisis intervention program, we don't get a chance to hang around for that, to see the full story come to fruition, because we're connecting them with resources and we're closing the cases out. But just to be able to, when you first get that initial visit, sit down with them, talk with them, and get all of that rich history, that stuff is, I mean, I love it. That's one of the reasons why I continue to be in this field, is because I do like that.
Awesome.
The connection. I love the connection.
I can recall that was the part when I was a younger social worker, in undergrad, after undergrad, before my master's, I worked at a skilled nursing facility. So it was mainly the elderly population, and everything you said, just so many stories. I had actresses that were there. They would show me like pictures of Clark Gable and all these different people. I'm like, oh my gosh, they have it hung up, and just sitting there and listening to their stories, you were amazed just to hear like, wow, some of the things that they have gone through and the experiences that they had. And they loved to share. So I would have to
Yes.
make sure, you know, when I went in there, I knew I was going to sit there for a while with each of them whenever I went to a room to do my rounds, because they wanted to talk. And that was, you know, my role was to be present.
Right. Right. So
Wonderful. Thank you.
Well, no, thank you so much for taking the time to, you know, let us interview you, to share your experience. I mean, 19 years in the field, you know, working at AP, Adult Protective Services, providing a service as a social worker, and just some things that our, you know, social work students, as they're going to be going into the field, helping to give them some feedback on some things that, you know, they should be aware of. And I just wrote down just some key points. I love, you said, pack your patience. That if you're not, you know, if patience is not one of your better qualities and you struggle and you can't see yourself working on that, then this APS is not the place or the elderly population for you to work with, right? And always to be respectful when you are engaging with the elderly population, and listening, right? Making sure that you bring in your listening ears, and willing to use your available resources when you're working with the elderly, and not take things personally right, that occur. So, I mean, I do, once again, I thank you. I mean, do you have any other, do you have
any questions for me for people with disabilities or?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, because you work with, so is there a difference then with working with someone who has, okay. Okay, so yes, please tell us what some things to be mindful of if you're working with someone.
Very challenging. Usually people with disabilities are a little more of a challenge.
And when we're talking about disabilities, are we talking more about mental, like cognitive disabilities? You're talking about physical disabilities?
We're talking about mental disabilities. Well, the biggest hurdle is the mental disabilities.
Okay.
Clients that have mental disabilities, which are a little more handsy, and that's where your challenge comes.
Would that be
challenge?
When you say mental disability, are there, can you give us some examples? I know you mentioned if it's like Alzheimer's or dementia, right?
I'm talking about people with bipolar, schizophrenia, those types of behavioral disabilities, those types of things. I think that's where you really have to pack your patience, because that's where you're challenged at, right there. You know, you have clients that I haven't had anybody who physically came at me, but there has been cases where you could be assaulted.
Oh, where some aggression is there.
Aggression is there, those types of clients. My supervisor was slapped. So, you know, you have sometimes you have those types of clients.
So have you been trained and, you know, like, you know, risk factors, you know, safety, right? De-escalation, like how do you stand, you know, those types of things.
Yes, we have been. We've been trained in how to de-escalate those types of situations. But training is few and far in between. You don't get as much training as you should. A lot of it is common sense training, and just know it. And it's unfortunate, but it really is. But it is, you know, how to de-escalate a situation. We don't get as much as we should, but
So
I am trained because I've been there for so long.
I can imagine. Would there be a tone, like, so would you say, I'm just visualizing when we're thinking about the difference between the elderly population and those who have a, you know, mental disability, like you were saying, or cognitive or whatnot, would you need to approach them? Would you have to be mindful of your tone of voice and your own body language when you're providing service?
Sometimes it just depends on the situation. Like I had one client where she was upset that I interrupted because you know, we just show up. We don't announce when we're coming. So she was upset that I interrupted their trip to Disneyland. Her 5-year-old son and her started to come at me physically. She had her own kid coming at me, and she was coming at me physically. And if I did not raise my voice or use my voice as a parent almost, she would have, you know, continued to try to assault me.
Oh,
So
Wow.
it just
Wow.
depends on the situation, and you have to know when to do it and when not to do it.
Mhm.
Wow. So when you raised your voice, what do you say? Like, stop? Or I mean, like,
Yeah, well, I
I
was
can't
like,
imagine.
you need to go and sit down right now. You take your son and you go now. That's what she
Oh,
decided. Okay.
You have to be firm,
You
right?
have to be
Okay.
firm and authoritative.
Right.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
So you have to be
Just have to
mindful
know
of when you have to
when,
utilize that. Okay.
yes,
Mhm. Do
yes.
you go in pairs for safety?
I wish.
No.
No,
Okay. Well, but if
no.
you're so for social work students who they do, correct? Or do they?
No,
No.
No,
Oh,
nobody
they
wow.
does
don't. They changed
training,
that. They changed it.
Changed
nothing. I've been
Yeah, because I
under
had to find that
bridges.
out with one of my students like a couple of
Yes,
years ago.
it.
yes.
Oh, I did not know that.
I've been
Yeah,
under
there's
bridges, and I've been at
Okay.
night under bridges. I've
Okay.
had to do after hours. I've had to do all kinds of stuff all by myself.
Okay. So
a
they train
skid
you.
row.
Right. Okay. So they train you with safety practices, and then you yourself, like you said, you have to have awareness of your surroundings and for yourself have your own personal safety
Right.
practices. Okay.
Your biggest way of the best way that I say that you ever be able to get out of a situation is your ability to use words.
Mm.
That is your
good one.
biggest defense, is your ability to talk someone down, use words,
Okay.
I
use
like that.
body language, non-threatening body language.
Mhm.
Those are
Mhm.
your biggest weapons.
Mhm. Mhm.
You
I
know.
like that.
Okay.
I like that non-verbal communication, right? Non-threatening.
Right.
'Cause if you're sitting up like this, that's not,
That's
that's
right.
that's
Right.
aggressive versus
That's
the stance that you're
aggressive.
in. You have an open hand kind of thing, letting them know that,
Right.
you're not a threat kind of a
Not a
thing,
threat.
right? And so using I like how you said using your words to
Using
help
your
de-escalate
words.
and calm someone down too. So
Right.
Yeah.
Your tone. Like
mhm,
I said, you have to know when to use your tone. Sometimes you have to go up. Sometimes you
mhm,
got to go down.
Mhm.
So it is a skill.
Yeah.
mhm.
So
No,
it
I can
sounds like
imagine.
even advocacy for more trainings might be something that our
Mhm.
future social workers listening to this can
Yes.
work on, right?
Mhm.
Advocating for some more services. I like that. No,
Yeah.
thank you so much again. This has been definitely very helpful. And for those of you who are watching, you're probably saying, Arkadie, why does she have the same last name? She is that. Yes, she is my sister-in-law, one of them. I actually have a family full of social workers. So
social
there are a lot
workers.
of us, yeah, with the social work. So as you can tell, we love this profession. Social workers.
Right.
So thank you so much. Our students definitely going to benefit from this. And we just appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to sit down and, interview with us.
All right. Thank you for
Thank
having me.
you.
All right, you guys take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.